Hey, this is Elliot Fishman, and welcome to Facebook Live. Today is Thursday. I think it's about the 4th of November. So I hope everybody's doing well. Hard to believe it's November, but I will have to admit today when I was driving to work, it was 32 degrees, and a week ago it was 62 degrees. So now it's kind of it feels like fall or early winter. So hopefully everything's good wherever you are. On the COVID side of things, I think things are a little bit better, but again, everyone needs to be careful. Everyone's getting their third doses starting this week. The 5 to 12-year-olds, or 5 to 11-year-olds to be exact, will be getting doses. And then hopefully, first quarter next year, the under 5 kids will be able to get doses. So we are making some progress. And again, I recommend if you've not been vaccinated, now probably almost everybody in this call, particularly in the U.S., if you're not vaccinated, you're not going to be working at the hospital. So if you want to keep your job, get vaccinated. But it's the right thing to do, both for yourself, your family, and for society in general. So that's my public announcement. So I think this week I just asked Lily what I was supposed to speak about, and I'm speaking about the Felix Project. This is Pancreas Cancer Month. So not quite, but about 4.5 years ago, we started what's called the Felix Project, which is the early detection of pancreatic cancer. Pancreatic cancer is the third most common cause of death from pancreatic cancer. And with improvements in other cancers, its percentage of cancer deaths becomes higher and higher. Pancreatic cancer is a perplexing disease, lots of genetic mutations. Many diseases from lymphoma to testicular tumor to melanoma have all sort of breakthroughs in terms of chemotherapy and the like, but pancreatic cancer has not had that magic bullet yet invented. The only way for curing pancreatic cancer is early detection and surgery. We are giving chemotherapy and radiation therapy now to most patients to try to diminish the chance of spread of disease or make patients who are borderline resectable into resectable candidates. But at the end of the day, the only way you're going to make a real difference is early detection. There's some articles published. I was just reading an article from AJR, from the Japanese Oncology Group, that survival for patients with stage 1 pancreatic cancer is 70 to 80%. Typically, survival is 7 to 8%. So that's 7 to 8 versus 70 to 80 is a significant difference, obviously. But it's early detection. Early detection means small lesions, a centimeter or so, probably. And you think about it, we always think about small tumors as 2 centimeters, but that's not exactly a small tumor. So what is it that we could do better in terms of detection in pancreatic cancer? I gave a talk this week. Today is Thursday. I spoke at NYU at GI Rounds on Tuesday, and that's what I spoke about. So I made the point that scanners are getting better, but no matter how much better the scanners get, better spatial resolution, lower dose, more slices, all of the things you can think of, but that's not really going to change your ability to detect disease, because I think right now the limitations tend to be on the human side of things. Now, if you develop some really strange dual energy, which made the tumor stand out, perhaps that would be great, but that's not going to happen. So what are we looking at? So I spoke about 3 things. So let me just tell you about the 3 things I spoke about. But first, I'm going to say hi to John Biacchino. John's one of our senior techs, and John's he's from home today, which means he's off. And I'll say hi to Lydiana, who just got back from overseas. And when Lydiana was here at Hopkins, we had one of our, I had a pre-med student working with me, and now that person actually was applying for a fellowship with us today. So it's amazing how time flies. So, and I'm sure we're going to give him a job. He's probably not listening now, so at least he knows he's getting a job. I'll offer him a job for 2023. We're in the middle of fellowship interviews, by the way. Okay, but going back to pancreatic cancer, here's kind of the key things. One thing we're doing is cinematic rendering. So 3D imaging, trying to do texture mapping to look for early texture changes in pancreatic cancer. It's hard to find small masses, right? So the question is, the earliest change is going to be changes in texture. There's been several articles suggesting that. So we need to accentuate so that we can better appreciate those textural changes. Otherwise, we miss them. There's an article published in AJR in press, a couple of articles from Japan, the same article I was mentioning, which basically shows that tumors are present 6 months to 3 or 4 years before they're diagnosed. And you have that opportunity. It used to always be said, pancreatic cancer, you're well today, you got disease tomorrow. There's no lead time, kind of like colon cancer with polyps. But the answer is, based on everything being published now, there is the ability to pick things up earlier. The problem is we miss them. So texture analysis, accentuating visualization of the pancreatic tumor from normal tissue, I think is going to be critical. And we're putting a lot of effort into that. I think advancing cinematic rendering with better lighting models and texture mapping and everything else will be something I think that will be exceedingly valuable in that regard. So I spoke about that. The second thing I spoke about was radiomics. We did radiomics years ago. We've been putting it to good use in pancreas. We published 3 different papers. 1, detecting pancreatic cancer. Number 2, distinguishing between autoimmune pancreatitis and pancreatic cancer, which is often a problem. And number 3, detecting and predicting tumor recurrence in patients based on factors. And in each case, radiomics was substantially better than anything else we've done, okay? Radiomics was 15 to 30% better than radiologists. So we need to really work on building up the radiomics, how we can use radiomics. And there's lots of articles being written on radiomics. We're looking at work distinguishing between neuroendocrine tumors, grade 1, which you can follow, versus grade 2 and 3, which you resect. We're looking at predicting response to chemotherapy. We're looking at response to surgery. So there's lots of factors we can do by looking at radiomics. So that becomes very, very important with random forest techniques. It's something we need to really do, and that becomes something of great importance. So we're working on that. The third thing we're working on is deep learning. And of course, we've been spending our time, which is the Felix Project, which is generously supported by the Lustgarten Foundation, which supports only pancreatic research, and they're just a tremendous resource, and we owe them a big debt of gratitude for their support. And all of us, you know, whether you're working on this project or you're just outside in the world, Lustgarten is spending a lot of money trying to early detect and cure pancreatic cancer. So what we've been doing there, a combination of work with Bert Vogelstein and Ken Kinsler from genetics and oncology, and Ralph Rubin from pathology, and ourselves in radiology, and Alan Yulee and his team from computer science at Homewood, our undergraduate campus, is creating protocols for detecting small tumors. It looks like our accuracy is in the high 90% for picking up small tumors, and on the limited studies we've done, somewhere between 15 and 25% better than real radiologists. So we're looking at that more with different studies to see how well we can do in looking and detecting pancreatic cancer with the computer. Should we use just deep learning, or should we combine deep learning with radiomics, using the two of them together? Would that be the best bang for the buck? I think so. I think with radiomics, you pick up there's a tumor, you don't see where it is, but there's a tumor here. Hopefully the deep learning will find a tumor. The question is, you know, if the deep learning was always accurate, would the radiomics help? I guess you need to do big trials to prove that, but I think the answer will be yes. And radiomics provides so much more information. I think it's going to provide information in terms of what chemotherapy to use, when the patient should get surgery. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive for each other, but I think the radiomics is going to play a major role in that. I then also presented some work we're doing with Microsoft and the team there, which were early in the game. But what Microsoft has looked at is some work Bert Vogelstein and Ken Kinsler and Anne-Marie Lennon and Chris Wolfgang and associates did about 4 or 5 years ago, published in 2019, looking at cystic lesions, and came up with a test called like the CompCyst, which was using AI to make better predictions of what patients should be operated on or not. It ends up that the program they developed was better than clinicians, but still 40% of patients who went to surgery across multiple sites didn't need surgery because their lesions were low grade or there was no malignancy at all. So, you know, what do you do? Well, they're now looking at the guys at Microsoft. Juan and his team are looking at all of the data and re-looking at it. They've developed some new algorithms for being able to analyze data which has multiple inflection points, to be able to re-look at this data. And what's very impressive, and maybe it's no surprise because AI has changed so much over the last 5 years, is they're better able to predict, probably 30 or 40% more accurate than the original AI predictions, of what factors you need to use to be able to choose how to manage patients. And it's interesting because, the surgeons will say, and they did say in the call, and the GI guys will say also that, hey, when we decide to operate, there's 5 things we look at, A, B, C, D, E, okay? Well, it ends up, the computer says, well, no, there's 5 things you need to look at to make the detection, is it malignant or non-malignant, or pre-malignant versus not pre-malignant, and here are the factors. Well, they would say, well, we don't use those factors to make the decision. But that's the point about AI. AI looks and says, what factors are important for us to be able to make the decision? Remember, that's the thing, is physicians make decisions based on what they've been taught. Physicians are not open books either. It's not like you say AI, well, it's a black box. Most physicians are black boxes too. The best physicians, John Cameron, is really good. Now, I don't think he can always explain why he tells you what he does. He can kind of sort of explain, but you have this gestalt. I know because I've seen this 10,000 times before. The best clinicians kind of look and they say, this is this disease. How do you know? I know. It's like my grandmother. How do you know? I know. Well, it's true because you've seen it so many times. It's like Aunt Minnie. How do you know your aunt? That's the joke, right? Well, that's my aunt. Well, how do you know? Why is it someone else's aunt? Well, that's what you recognize. So I think that's going to be very big. And this whole AI is going to make you rethink of the assumptions you make, why you do something, why you don't do something. That becomes very, very important. So that will indeed, that's the kind of the other part of what we're doing. So that's what I spoke about. I think there's tremendous opportunity to really improve how we do things. I think you need that paradigm shift. When people talk about radiologists and detection of disease and worry about radiology jobs, that's not what you need to worry about. What you need to worry about, in my opinion, is how do we integrate this new technology into our workflow? How do we move it forward that we can improve patient care, that we can do things better? I think that's really what we are looking for. And that's what is exciting, and that's what people are funding us to do. They're not funding us to twiddle around looking at some improving an algorithm from 72.1 to 72.2. No. They want to know is, can you change the trajectory of disease? Can you decide who should or shouldn't get operated on and do that better? Can you triage patients better? Can you figure out how to treat patients better? What's the chemotherapy? Is there something hidden in those voxels that allow you to know this is the right therapy for this patient and this is not the right therapy for this patient? How do we know we're making the right decisions early on in the process? I think that's what's very exciting to me, and that's really where the opportunity comes in. The opportunity of simply just reading more cases every day, okay, that's great, whatever, you get more RVUs. That's not our goal, right? Our goal is patient care, and to really do patient care, you need to have discovery. You need to rethink what you've been thinking, and you need to think differently. I think that's what's very exciting. We had a speaker last night, the CEO of a company called Wealthy, as in healthy, talking about her changing how people manage difficult situations in healthcare by having basically helpers, where you go and there's somebody who you call up and they'll help you navigate, whether it's child care, whether it's elder care, whatever the problem is, temporary or long term. It's rethinking. There's all these resources that are available, but how do you use those resources? How do you, as an individual who have a crisis where you've never been in that crisis, how do you navigate the crisis correctly without crashing and burning? Okay, that becomes so important. The same thing is true with imaging. how do we change the trajectory of what we are doing? How do we improve what we are doing? So that becomes important. Now, I'm happy to answer any questions in that regard. I think there's one question from Manaverdra. Patients for abdominal pain who did not undergo dedicated pancreatic protocol are incidentally detected with pancreatic lesion are willing to get a repeat scan. Well, I mean, the good news is if you pick up a lesion, then you need to biopsy it. So I think you can worry at first about the repeat scan after. But if you pick up a lesion, something needs to be done, and biopsy confirmation is typically what has to happen. Our goal is to pick up pancreatic cancer on these incidental non-pancreatic scans. If someone says rule out pancreatic mass, we do a lot better. If someone just says abdominal pain, rule out anything, which is a typical requisition for most people, well, then you're much more difficult because pancreas is just one of many organs in the body. You're not studying the pancreas as carefully. You're potentially doing a single phase imaging, but that's where you really need to make the difference. If you want to make a big difference in pancreatic cancer, it's going to be on the non-pancreatic cancer studies. When someone says rule out pancreatic cancer, the radiologist often doesn't miss it. When someone says rule out anything, that's when the radiologist has a 5 to 30% error rate in missing the obvious lesions. Now, the last thing I'll leave you with, there's an article from the consortium, from the CAPS consortium. They follow patients with high risk for pancreatic cancer and follow it, and they've been doing this for 20 years. They have about 2,500 patients. And the way they follow them, they don't use much CT, they use EUS and MR. But they just published an article which basically says that they're not really successful because half the patients who develop cancer developed between the testing times. So let's say a testing every year, the patient got cancer and it was spread between the two scans. So, and their conclusion was we need better tests, whether it's blood tests or imaging tests or lab tests, we need something different because even patients we're following who are high risk, where we know we're looking for pancreatic cancer, we're still not helping them because the cancer often develops in between. And no, you can't scan someone every month. So how do you change that paradigm on a disease that keeps throwing us a curveball? So I think it's really difficult, okay? So I think that's going to be the problem. And there's lots of interest. There's a lot of computer people, there's a lot of medical people trying to come together and put this terrible disease more under control because right now it's out of control. So the Felix Project, we're in Pancreas Month. We want to thank our friends at Lustgarten. We want to thank our friends at Microsoft. We want to thank our friends at undergraduate campus and here, and everybody in surgery and oncology for helping us build this multidisciplinary project. And you could read about it on CTisus. There's a whole bunch of articles. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer it. If not, I'm going to stop there and thank everybody a great day. See you later.